Hello everyone. It's nice to meet 885 for SpinX. My first sort of video. It's not like a real lecture, but I was browsing hands versus fish, the hands which you guys have posted, and this particular hand has piqued my attention. It's not a very interesting hand, but the spot um, in which our hero arrives, I think, is very interesting because from the small blinds point of view, it's very hard to play, and a lot of the people misunderstand how to play the spot accurately. And I wanted to, go in depth about the sport so that you guys know how to play it and you guys know how to exploit the people who makes mistakes here. Uh, so small blind, this is big blind. Small blind has approximately 13.5 big blinds. He min raises, big blind calls, small blind bets for half pot, and big blind calls. And I just want to start right there. First, we need to think what strategy should small blind be using on this board. And most people would think that on an ace high board, we should be betting close to 100% frequency because ace high board is, a very good board for us because we're raising a lot of aces, which our opponent mostly will be free bet jamming. So he doesn't have a lot of aces. We have a lot of aces. We have a range advantage. We also have a lot of good pocket pairs. So we should be betting, a ton. But it's not true in this particular spot. So if we look at, and I've done quite a few calculations here to illustrate my point. If you look, for example, at 20 big blinds in this particular situation, 23 big blinds, you will see that small blind indeed has a 100% c-bet strategy. You may wonder why we use a bigger bet. Like sometimes, mostly 80% of the time, we go for a small c-bet, like a quarter pot, mostly, but sometimes we go for a pot bet. This happens because if we use only small bet, then our opponent, big blind, has no incentive to raise because our range is very, very strong. And we want to get value with our strong aces, such as ace king, ace jack, ace 10. And if we never face raises from queen or from a small ace, we would want to make the pot bigger, right? When we have like ace jack, ace 10. That's the reason why solve the plays like that. And to make it simpler, you could just be betting 100% quarter pot. It's like solid, good strategy. You don't need like the EV which you're extracting by using this strategy is not like, it's not a lot. I would recommend betting if you have a good ace versus a fish, versus like with a smaller size, with a bigger size for sure, because fish will fail to float enough on the flop, like they will overfold quite a bit. So I would prefer using a bigger size when I hold an ace. But overall, just betting 100% for a small size is a good solid strat on this particular board. However, if we look at, for example, flop ace 5-3, then we will see that we still have a high c-bet strategy, we c-bet close to 100%, but we use a pot bet quite a bit more often, and we use like a half pot quite a bit more often. It happens because we have a lot of vulnerable hands, such as pocket nines, pocket eights, pocket seven, pocket sixes, queen five, jack five, king five, which want to get in the money now. They require a lot of protection, and they realize that, like, for example, they wouldn't probably get the money in very good. Like if sixes pot and face a jam, or if you have like 10-5 and you pot and you face a jam, and when you call, it's very likely that you are going to be behind, like with sixes you're ahead, but when you have 10-5, it's like 50-50 for you. It's not like a super good situation for you. And this is a lot of people. I mean, it depends whether your opponent would be jamming aces on you or not, and how frequently he would be jamming a hand like queen 5, jack 5. I think this is a lot of people, like most people would be just calling 5-4, but would be jamming queen 5 and jack 5. So 10-5 is still a call, but you're not that excited about the situation. However, if you use a bigger size with your pocket pairs, and if you use a big size with your fives, what you accomplish is you're making them fold hands which have a lot of equity versus you, such as Jack 10, 8-6, 8-7 with a backdoor flash draw, the hands which they wouldn't have folded otherwise, and you extract a lot of value versus a hand like King 3. For example, if he has King 3 of clubs, he has only 5 outs versus you. He has 3 kings and 2 threes. And he has a very poor realization of those outs. However, if he has a hand like King 9 with the King of Hearts, then he has 6 outs versus you instead of 5. And also, like a heart is a very good turn for him as well, on which we would have to be checking a lot, and he gets to realize his equity, And even if we jam, he would be able to call. So getting him to fold a hand like King 8 with the King of Hearts is a lot for us. And I mean, getting him to pay a pot with this hand is also a very good situation for us. So we charge a lot of money from hands which we dominate, or from hands which have very little equity versus us, and we make him go away with hands which have a very good equity versus us. The second thing which we accomplish by betting really big on this board when we hold, pocket pair, a small pocket pair or a 5, is that we make our life on the turn a lot easier. So if we bet really tiny, his range is going to be very wide. He's going to call a lot of stuff, and any overcard is devastating for us. Like if the turn is a 9 or a 10, we understand that it's a very bad turn, like an 8, because he's going to call us with 9-8 with a backdoor, 10-9 with a backdoor, so many hands which will improve on this turn. And the SPR is quite, it's quite big for us. Like we can't just get it in on the turn. Like the port will be like 7.5, right? And we will still have like 19 big blinds in stack. And, we have a third pair in very difficult situation. However, by betting a pot, first of all, the SPR on the turn is going to be 1, so it's going to be easy to get it in. And also a 9, like an 8, a 7 are very blank for us, because most of the hands which hold a 10, a 9, or a 7 are just going to be folded on the flop because we bet so much. So not only do we get protection, but also we realize our equity a lot better. Because an overcard, like if a turn is a 9 of clubs, we're just going to be jamming on the turn, even though we have a third pair, because a 9 is a complete blank for us. There are still a lot of turns which are going to be difficult for us, for sure, but still it makes our life a lot easier. That's why we use a pot bet here quite often. Like a c-bet, a quarter pot on the flop is not going to work when, the second card to an ace is lower than a 10. If you see like ace 9-8, ace 7-6, ace 6-5, you're gonna always see like a bigger size on the flop. He's gonna choose between two sizes, like a small bet and a big bet. And a big bet is like pocket pairs, fives. We still need to have some aces, right, to protect our range, because if we have only like pocket pairs, if the turn is like a king of hearts, we just need to check 100% of our hands, and we have a very weak poor range, so we need some strong aces. And our bluffs are going to be the hands which have some backdoor potential, and which are the bottom of our range, like 9-8, 9-7, 8-7, 10-8, right? We don't want to be porting king 10, because king 10 has some showdown value. If you go for a block bet, like if you choose to bet a quarter pot with king 10, you're going to get called with some king highs which you beat. You're going to get called with some queen highs which you beat. On some turns you could check call. The turn is a queen, the turn is a jack, right? So you have a potential to get value from hands which you dominate, and sometimes you could successfully bluff catch. And if you check the turn, it doesn't mean that you lose the pot. You could steal a call, find a call. You could, even if you don't face a gutter, sometimes you can find a call. So these hands, we really want to go for a smaller size. And when we have the bottom of our range, like the worst hands, which we could hold, hopefully we have a backdoor. With them, we want to go for a bigger size. So I hope all of this makes sense, and I hope you understand why we bet 100% strategy and why on this particular board we want to go very frequently for a large size, such as pot bet, which is uncommon on lower stakes. Now, what happens if we go for Ace-5-4. I chose Ace-5-4. I had already calculated Ace-5-3. You can trust me on this, but Ace-5-4 and Ace-5-3 are basically played exactly the same. And as you can see here, if you compare 23 big blind strategy on an Ace-5-3 board, and you compare 14 big blind strategy on Ace-5-4 board, right? You can see that they are super different, all right? Like here you check only 6% of the time, here you check 53% of the time, which is a lot. And why is this happening, right? What's going on? Like, because it's an ace high board. But if you look closely, you will realize that when we're very shallow, we don't have as many aces in our range, because all of our offsuit aces, which we could raise here, and even here, as you can see, like 23 blinds, we will still be open jamming ace 9, ace 8, ace 7, and some of our weak offsuit aces. But we still have ace queen, ace king, ace queen, ace jack, ace 10, and we still have all of our suited aces, right? Which we would open for a normal size. However, 14 big blinds, we would just be open shoving them, right? 14 big blinds, if you have ace king offsuit out of position, you don't want to min raise it, because your hand plays really poorly out of position post flop. Like, you have immediately showdown value, and it's very hard for you to realize this equity. You'd rather just go all in. So it leaves us with a very weak range when an ace hits, especially when an ace and a lower and the board is very low. As you can see, we don't have any fives, almost any fives in our range. We have king 5, and we have some suited fives, right? While our opponent, if you see, he's got queen 5 offsuit, jack 5 offsuit, a5 offsuit, 7-5, 6-5, every suited 5, almost every offsuit 5, 5-3 offsuit. We don't have almost any fours in our range, close to nothing. Our opponent has not a lot of offsuit fours, but every suited 4, and he still have 4-3 offsuit, 6-4 offsuit, 5-4 offsuit, a ton. We don't have hands like a6 offsuit, 8-3 suited, which is a gutter, 7-3 suited, 6-3 suited, which is an open-ender, 4-2 suited and stuff like that, 3-2 suited, which is a straight. And our opponent has, again, we don't have any of them. Our opponent has all of them, which makes his range really strong on this board. We still have an equity advantage, but we need to build a very high checking range, because we don't hit this range as good as you might think. And a lot of the players, I feel, would just be c-betting 100% on an ace high board, even though it doesn't hit them very well. And so I want to clarify why this strategy is wrong. And now let's go and think about how we could exploit players who are c-betting 100% of the time on any ace high boards, then the stacks are really shallow. So again, this strategy is very similar to this strategy. The difference is that instead of block betting our king highs, we go for a check, because our range is a lot weaker. Before, we could block bet a bunch of our king highs and queen highs against some protection, because we had a lot of a6, ace4, a lot of offsuit aces, which we could go for a block bet as well, so that our range is protected altogether. We had these hands. I hope you can see my mouse. Here we don't have them, so instead of a block bet, we usually go for a check. And to protect our checking range, now that we have a very wide checking range, we go check our kings, our pocket queens, our pocket jacks, and some of our ace king, ace queen, ace jack. Primarily, we will be looking to check hands like ace queen of spades, because first of all, we don't need any protection, and second of all, having a queen of spades actually blocks a lot of his continuing range. So ace queen of spades is a great example of a hands which we will be looking, to check, to trap with. However, like a7 or a6, we will be looking to be betting, because a7, a6 blocks his bluffs, but unblocks his king high, queen high, jack high hands, which he will be floating us with, given how small we will be betting if we're betting an ace. And same our 9s, 8s, 7s, 6s, pretty much the same as here, and our queen 5, jack 5, 10 5, our king 5, we're looking to bet pot. Here you can see that we're not balanced as compared to this pot. Here we're potting some of our strong aces as well. However, here we're not doing any of that. And it has to do with SPR. When we go for a pot bet here, and our opponent calls, the stack is only 8 big blinds, and the pot is already 12. So the SPR is so small, and also our opponent doesn't have as many aces as well, because we min raised 14 bigs. He still has some, he has suited aces, he has some offsuit aces, but still he doesn't have as many as he has here, right? So first off, our pocket 9s, pocket 10s, pocket 7s, pocket 6s are a lot stronger due to our opponent lack of aces, a lack of top pairs. And secondly, the SPR is a lot more shallow, so we're a lot more comfortable to get the money in on uncomfortable turns, right? So even if the turn is like a king of hearts, which is sort of a bad turn, we could still, I did some calculations here, mostly for fun, but you could still get it in if you're holding like pocket sixes, for example, or pocket sevens, even though this is basically the worst turn for you. Like the worst turn for you is a king of spades. Like this is like literally the worst turn which you could hit. But even on this card, pocket sixes, you still could get it in. You will get it in slightly behind, but it's not a big deal. Like it's still a reasonably comfortable get in for you. And imagine if it turned like a 9 or a 10. These are completely blanks. Okay. So that's why we don't need to be potting with our aces in this situation, but we need to pot with our aces in the situation on the left. As far as bluffs are concerned, we're using the same types of hands. And why I explained before, I hope that this is clear. Now, how should we proceed? If our opponent is using a 100% c-bet strategy? So let's go for this. And in the hand, our opponent used a half pot size bet, which I really dislike. As you can see here, this is we don't use it very rarely. And just in general, half pot bet is very uncommon size. You would either bet for a very big size, especially if you're going polar, or you would want to use like a smallish size. Very infrequent solver goes for a half pot bet because it doesn't accomplish much in terms of our range. So he will still do it from time to time when, for example, we have a polarized range, but the card which came on the turn, for example, has improved our opponent. For example, on the turn, there is a flush, which has completed, and we still want to keep betting our top pair, but if the turn was a blank, we could go for like a pot bet or over bet, but now we have to settle for 3/4 or even a half pot. And in this situation, very frequently he will go for like a half pot. But mostly he either chooses a very small size or a very big size. Okay, so here I did a simulation. What if my opponent was simply using c-bet half pot 100% of the time? Again, probably it's not realistic. I think most players will still have some checking range here. Like they will from time to time be checking pocket queens, so like queen jack, king 10, king 9. But this is just a simple assumption to see how drastically we could, we could exploit him if we want to. So in this situation, when we face half pot, uh, as you can see, we already are interested in jamming a hand like 6-5, 7-5, jack-5, etc. It's important to say that we would prefer to jam a hand like 7-5 with no, or to raise, right? Whatever you like, with no backdoors, and we would like to call a 7-5 with a backdoor flash draw. I believe same is gonna happen here. Jack-5 with a jack of spades is almost a pure call. However, if we don't have a jack of spades, we almost always raise. This happens because Jack-5, with the backdoor or without, have very similar equity, right? But the playability is very different. If you call with Jack-5 without a spade and the turn is like a blank and you face a jam, um, it's very, like, sometimes you have to find a call, but it's very hard situation for you. A lot of the turns, like 6, a 7, or a spade, will be a nightmare to play. You have to very frequently fold and you lose a lot of equity by doing so. However, if you have Jack-5 with a jack of spades, not only you have like 3.5% more equity, which is relevant, but the more relevant thing is that you have 10 more turns on which you can continue. Like if you have Jack-5 without a spade and turn is a 6 of spades, or even just a random 6, you have to fold usually. If the turn is a 6 of spades and you have Jack-5 with a jack of spades, you have a very easy call on the turn. So it's very easy for you to play turns and rivers, mostly turns, and therefore you will be looking to call these hands which are really easy to play in the turn, and you will be looking to get it in with the hands which are very hard to play. Uh, Very similar to like why we open jamming pocket pairs pre-flop, like pocket deuces for 20 bigs, because it's very hard to play them post-flop, or like a weak offset ace, right? Basically the same reasoning. Okay. So even here, raising queen 5, jack 5, makes a lot of sense. As bluffs are concerned, queen 3 and jack 3 with the spades are the hands which we will primarily be using for either raising none all in or just jamming all in. I would probably be mostly using here raising none all in, but I don't think it matters too much. So this is about 100%. A few things change. First off, we're raising a lot more frequently, as you can see. We're raising every second pair, which we could get our hands on. We're raising some fours, like queen 4 is just a jam. And we're raising a lot more bluffs. Queen 3, even without the spades, become a reasonable hand to jam, which might seem shocking for you, right? But you underestimate how weak this range is if he bets 100% of the time for a half pot. Because if you jam, in order not to be overfolded, he has to be calling you with as weak as king 7 with a 7 of spades. It's actually a 100% call, and this is, in this particular situation, it's a winning call. Uh, Even king 7 without a spade, which like especially king 10 without a spade, which might seem ridiculous, is a close call. Like it's minus 0.03, so it's almost winning, right? Uh, it happens because if he doesn't call these hands, if he starts folding king 7, king 6, king 8 with the backdoor, or like for example queen 6 of hearts, imagine that you see bet for half pot and you face an all-in, right? You face all-in like it's like for 12 big blinds, and you call with a single queen high, which is quite loose. You know, if you stop making these calls, you will be folding way too much, like way too much. At this point, he might even start jamming like super ridiculous hands. If you overfold this much, like he might start jamming a hand like queen 6 with the queen of spades, which is already, you know, doing all right jamming. You're not missing that much. But if opponent starts folding all of his king highs and queen highs with a backdoor, then you know you're in a lot of trouble. So this is one of the adjustments which you should be making. You should be raising a ton. You don't have to go all in necessarily. You can also like raise none all in. It's also acceptable. If you feel uncomfortable like jamming all in with a weak gutter for so much money, because it still will put him in a lot. It still will put a lot of pressure on him. Not only uh, does he have to be free betting you a lot now? Like he has to free bet jam and almost all of his pocket pairs. He has to free bet jam any 5. He has to free bet jam any 4, and lots of people will be very uncomfortable with free bet jam in a hand like Jack 4 of diamonds. Most of them would just go for a call, right? Or with like a weak 5, for example. Some of them might go for a call, and almost none of them would go all in with king 8 with the king of spades. As you can see, you should do it quite often. Queen 8, like people will be playing a lot tighter than that. People will be making folds with hands like Jack 7 with a backdoor, Queen 7 with a backdoor. I guess it depends on the person. Some people might, you know, might not believe you when you raise them on an ace high board, but it doesn't matter because it's not like you you can bluff a lot, because you can also value bet extremely thin. Like you can raise 6-5 on this flop very comfortably and you know get it in on the flop, and you will very frequently be ahead. You will make him fold a lot of equity. Like this is a very good situation for you if he's playing the strategy. Um, Also, we get to call uh, a lot more frequently, right? Here we're folding 28% of the time. Here we're folding 18% of the time. Again, it happens because like this range consists of a lot of trash, like Jack 9 off, 10-9 off, 10-8 offsuit, and he bets all of them. You know, like our King 8 here without a backdoor has 43% equity. Our King 8 here without a backdoor has 49% equity, 49.7, so almost 50% equity. And as you can see, EV here is, basically break even. And here we have EV of almost 1 big blind. So it is 100 big blinds per 100 hands, which is exceptionally good. Like king high call here becomes super good even versus a half pot bet. You could float ridiculously wide. Even as weak as queen 9 offsuit with no backdoor, you could find a call versus a half pot bet. If your opponent is playing the strategy of never checking his trash. Because again, he doesn't have as much value as you might think. Okay, having covered that, let's see how we should approach the situation if he's using slightly different strategy. If he's betting 100%, but he's using a quarter pot instead of a half pot. And how is that different? And it is quite different. Because when your opponent goes for a half pot, and that's why I said that your opponent chose a very poor strategy using this size on the flop, since there are very few hands which want to go for this size, and if he wanted to go like c bet 100% of the time, it would be better for him to be betting for a smaller size, such as one big blind. There are very few hands in his range which want to go for one big, because for two bigs. Because if you have like an ace, or you have like king high, or like pocket queens, I mean, very frequently you want to check these hands, but if you want to bet very small, like a quarter pot. Because if you bet king high and you bet a quarter pot, you get calls from all king highs which you dominate, you get calls from queen highs which you beat, you still make him fold hands like 9-8, which is good for you. If you have like an ace, you have zero need of protection, right? Like the more floats he has in his range, the better it is for you. Like if he's floating you with 9-8 with a 9 of spades and you have ace 10, it's very bad when you have a 5, because you get him to call you for a very cheap price with a hand which has like 6 outs versus you and a ton of backdoors, and you will have to check on the turn quite often. When you have an ace and you are that shallow, it's not a problem for you, right? And when you have vulnerable hands, you want to bet as big as possible. You want to bet like a pot bet. Okay, so now when an opponent uses a size of just a button for a very small, sizing, quarter pot, but 100% of the time, you would think not much changes, right? You'd still like raise a lot, but the truth is you actually raise a lot less frequently, and the reason for it is when the opponent was using a half pot, he was giving you a very good price for a jam. This extra big blinds actually plays a very big role. It's same like if your opponent is min raising pre-flop, or if he is using like 2.5 size, or if he's like a complete fish and using 3 big blind size. Right? When he's using 3 big blind size, you want to free bet jam a lot more frequently because there are more money in the pot, and making him fold equity makes a lot more sense, and just gaining the pot right now, because there is already a lot more money into the pot to be had. But the worse price is for you, right? The less inclined you are to go just all in because it's just too expensive for you. And in this situation, you don't wanna go all in with 6-5 as you wanted versus a half pot bet. To the contrary, you want to call all of your weak fives as opposed to here. And you might ask the question, but why is that? Like before, he had a very wide checking range, and we were raising quite frequently. But now this is a 100% strategy. We are not raising any fives at all. It happens because before he was 14 with all of his pocket pairs, 9s, 8s, 7s, 6s, and he was 14 with his queen 5, jack 5, 10, 5, 9, 5. So whenever he used a small bet, he either had an ace, a good pocket pair, or like a king high, queen high kind of hand. I mean, some bluffs as well. So this range raising a 5 makes a lot of sense because you are not encountered with the hands which super dominate you as frequently. If he has king high, he will very often call your small raise. Again, if he has an ace or like pocket kings, he would just call your raise and you get a free card. He would just check on the turn and go to the river. And if he has some sort of bluff, he would just fold. Here, instead of betting pot with his 9s, 8s, 7s, or with his king 5, he goes for a small bet, which makes, funny enough, it makes overall his range weaker, but for fives, it makes zero sense for you to start raising because there is no value to be had. Like there are a lot more hands which beat you. As you can see here, that before we were folding 13% of the time, like 14% of the time. Now we are folding 0% of the time because our king high hands, queen high hands, and jack high hands are a lot stronger. I would not recommend you calling as light as like 10-9 with no backdoors. But again, as you can see here, even a hand as weak as Jack 10 off with no backdoors, has 32.7% equity and has a very passive call. Over here, Jack 10 with no backdoors has 27% equity and has, break-even call. So we have like a 5% equity difference. So again, we want to be calling a lot with our Broadway cards, with our backdoors, and so on. But when we hold a 5, now there is no need for us to raise because his range is a lot more nutted. Like he has a lot more hands which dominate us. Before it was like either super strong hand, he had a bunch of hands which we had very good equity against, and a bunch of bluffs which we could make him fold. Now he has a lot more bluffs, but he also has a lot more value hands. So we call a lot lighter him. Our king highs, queen highs, jack highs become stronger. Our fives become stronger as well, but we have a lot less value in raising. To give a good example to understand why is this happening, why are we calling wider but we're not raising wider, because usually when someone's range is weaker, you will both be raising more frequently and calling more frequently. Here, as you can see, we're calling more frequently, but we're raising less frequently, which is kind of counterintuitive. Imagine the situation where on the river you have like a decent hand, and you have like a good top pair, and you have around 85% equity. So your opponent range consists of 50% bluffs, like even say like 50% bluffs, 40% are hands which you beat, and 10% are the hands which beat you. So this is this range, right? He goes for half pot. So you have 90% equity, right? If only 10% of hands beat you, you usually want to go for a raise, right? Because like 40% of his, or 50% of his range are the hands which actually could call you, and like 4/5 of these hands you beat. So even though some of them will fold, but more likely than not, you will get called by a hand which you beat. So you want to go for a check raise. Now let's imagine another situation where, again, you're kind of in this similar position. You have a top pair and your opponent's bets on the river, but now his range consists of, say, 95% of his range are bluffs, and 5% of his range are nutted hands which beat you, right? In this situation, even though now you have more equity compared to before you had 90% equity, now you have 95, there is zero sense for you to start raising, because he either has a bluff, which will never be calling you, or he has a very good hand, which already beats you. I mean, to give a more appropriate example, let's say his range consists of 5% bluffs, 5% super good value, and like 45% hands which are very thin value bets, which would never consider calling your raise, and 50% bluffs. So before we had like 10% super good hands, 40% hands which are really good value bets. You still beat them, but these are value bets which could consider calling your check raise, and 50% bluffs. And the second example, we have 5% nutted hands, 45%, very thin value bets which would never call your raise, and 50% bluffs. And in second example, it should be quite clear that even though your hand has more equity, it's less sense for you to be raising. So the same thing happens here. Even though small blind range is weaker, but at the same time, there are a lot more nutted hands in his range. So you should be calling wider, but you should be raising less. However, again, if he starts betting larger size, if he starts betting 2 blinds or 2.5 blinds, at this point it makes sense for you to just start jamming a lot, because the pot odds are just way too good. And making him fold any 2 cards is very enticing, given how big the pot already is. Like when he bets 2 big blinds, it's already 6 big blinds in the pot. So basically half of your stack is invested in the pot already. Okay. I hope it was simple enough. The key here is to realize that an ace-high board, if you had the initiative and an ace-high board came, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have an advantage on this board. Another great example, and this is going to be my last example. Let's imagine that we're playing like 20, 18 big blinds heads up. You limp. Your opponent isolates for 3 bigs, and you call. And the board comes down ace king 5 rainbow. And most people think that they have a very good advantage on this board, and they bet for a small size 100% of the time, which is a very big mistake. Because again, if you look at the big blind's isolating range, he has very few offset aces. He has 0 offset aces in this situation, and he has only a few suited aces. And also his range is not very motivated to bet bet like pocket pairs, like pocket queens, pocket jacks, pocket tens. Why would you bet these hands, right? If your opponent didn't hit this flop, then he's just gonna fold, and he's gonna hold hands like 9-8, offsuit like queen 8, jack 8, and these are the hands which dominate. These are the hands which are almost dead versus you. You would rather check and let them catch up, not let them hit a pair, maybe let them bluff. Same happens when you have a king. So like your kings and your pocket pairs have very little motivation into betting, right? And that's why, as you can see, if you hit an ace, even 50% of the time, you have to check it in order to protect your king X, your pocket pairs, your queen highs, and stuff like that. And most people don't understand how the spot works and just go and bet 100%. It does make sense to bet 100% if the board is, say, a7-5 or close to 100%, because on a7-5 your pocket pairs all of a sudden become a lot better. On ace king 5, if you hold pocket tens, you lose to any ace, you lose to any king, and the hands which could call you are like queen jack, queen 10, jack 10, which already have an over versus you, and a gutter, maybe like queen with a backdoor flash draw, which still has a lot of equity versus you. Not a lot, but like decent percentage, and very often it will outplay you. Like it will bluff you out of a pot. The runout is not very good for you. So on ace king 5, it makes close to 0 sense to bet in your pocket pairs and with kings. However, on a7-5, not only are your pocket pairs stronger, and as you can see, very similar to small blind versus big blind pot, we're using a bigger size when we're holding pocket nines, pocket tens, pocket eights, jack 7, king 7, right? We're not going like a quarter pot, we're going for like 3/4. And now not only our hands are stronger, but also it makes a lot more sense to bet, because now our sevens require a lot of protection, our nines, our tens, our eights require a lot of protection, and so on. And in general, our range is a lot stronger on this board because our pocket pairs are stronger, which is not the case on ace king 5 or ace queen 5 or ace queen 10. On this flop, we're going to be checking a lot. Very similar happens on ace 5-4. Like if you compare the strategy on ace 5-4, right, you will see that we are checking a lot. Let's go here. as we saw before, if we talk about like 14 big blinds or something like that, this is scare strategy. You can see that it's very similar to the strategy which I have mentioned before. If we go for A65, we see that nothing happens. I mean, the change is not significant. It's pretty much the same. Like our check-in frequency is 41%. However, what happens if the flop is A75 instead? Now, if a flop is A75, it makes a lot of difference because we have F7, 10-7, 9-7, right? Especially if we bought like Ace 8-7. It's like a completely different board compared to A6-4 or A5-4 or A6-5. Because on Ace 8-7, let's go Ace 8-7. We have a bunch of eights, we have a bunch of sevens, and we have a bunch of gutters, like or straight draws, like Jack 9, Jack 10, 9, and so on. So on Ace 8-7, even for 14 bigs, we're going to have a c-bet 100% strategy because we hit this flop a lot harder. However, on Ace 5-4, we almost never have a top pair. We almost never have a second pair, right? We almost never have a 5. We almost never have a straight draw. We almost never have a third pair, and so on. On A7-7, we have a ton of second pairs, a ton of gutters, a ton of overcards and stuff. So on this board, c-betting 100% makes a lot of sense because we actually hit it. On ace low boards, it makes 0 sense because big blind has a ton of hands which hit it, and we have close to 0. Okay. So, well, it was a little bit longer than I expected. I hope it was informative. I'm looking forward to your comments, what you like, what you dislike. Do you want me making this sort of videos? Would you prefer a lecture, maybe, so I can answer your questions live? Anyway, any kind of feedback would be very welcome. So, good luck and see you at the tables.